Bind us together, Lord, bind us together in love. There's only one God. There's only one King. There's only one body. And that is why we can sing, bind us together, Lord, bind us together in love.
God is calling the people of our Saviors to take our ministry out into the world together. And then we have specific visions. Broaden and enrich our relationships among our members. Directly share ourselves and the presence of Christ within us with the world. Deepen our love and understanding of the world beyond our doors. Cherish our Saviors as our home to which we return. So we saw that this, the building program was one of the ways we were implementing this, and setting the worship schedule is another tool to implement the vision that we set out to accomplish a couple of years ago.
The primary items that we took into consideration, obviously the worship style and the worship times, education and fellowship, children in worship, logistics, how can we make all of this happen, and teamwork. And so to give you a few details, some of the highlights of each of these areas. Worship style, you already know this. With concurrent, traditional, contemporary worship services over the years, church members have been divided between two different worship styles and times. One of our hopes is that the new worship schedule will help to unite the congregation, bind us together. Our Savior's has outstanding traditional worship services and contemporary worship services. There are church members who prefer one style of worship over another, and many members who enjoy a blend of worship styles. And then worship times. Many have informed us that 8:30 is too early for worship to begin. But what a joy it has been this summer, because many of you have told us that 8:30 is too early. The pastor agrees. I also go, man, 9 o'clock sure would sound nicer. Even 8:31 would sound nicer. But it has been a joy that the church has been full on Sunday mornings throughout the summer. And so we're thankful for that. But a whole long list of people who 8:30 makes it a challenge for them, and so the task force took that into consideration. We're also informed by many that 11 o'clock is too late for worship to begin, mostly because if you begin at 11, you probably end right around noon or just a little bit after noon, and there's something about our mindset and our bodies and Bears games or Packers games that when those games start, there's just something. We put God above Bears games, but at the same time, there's something about it. And so we heard that as well, and we actually asked ourselves and tossed it out the window, and then it came back to us like a boomerang. We said, is 10:50 or 10:55 better than 11? You may think that sounds foolish. We as a task force also thought it sounded foolish, and God has a sense of humor. So to kind of guide you where we might be headed here. If worship attendance increases, so what the plan was when you came up with the Building for the Next Generation building project, it became quite clear that you would move to 2 worship services on a Sunday, even though you originally had 3. Mostly because you've told us that 8:30 is too early, and 11 o'clock is too late, so how can we fit all 3 into that kind of small time? And so the plan, what you will see as this proposal, is that we will move from 3 Sunday worship services to 2, but wouldn't it be wonderful if a year from now, or 2 years from now, we gather together for a meeting again and we say, guess what, folks? Our worship attendance is fantastic. We need to find a way to add 3 services on a Sunday morning once again. Should other worship days, times, formats be considered? Wednesday evenings, Sunday evenings, any day of the week, is there a different time that could also be added so that we can add more opportunities for people to worship? Could the 5 o'clock Saturday worship service time be adjusted while all the other times are being adjusted a little bit later to allow for weddings? We made this presentation last night to the Saturday service and actually came up with, the Holy Spirit was active as we were coming up with some solutions and ideas for that as well at that listening session. Education. Many have requested an education fellowship time between worship services. Many have requested that there be 1 Sunday school time instead of 2. You may or may not know that over the past few years, one of the Sunday school sessions has been quite well attended and the other not as well attended. And so that's part of the reasoning why we would be asked to consider 1 instead of 2. Currently, youth who enjoy the contemporary worship service have to decide between youth Bible study and worship. should I go to Bible study or should I go to worship? Well, I kind of want to do both. And some adults and Sunday school kids have to make similar choices, which leads us to say, as a task force, and hopefully you as well, we want people to worship. And we want people to participate in education opportunities. How can a new worship schedule facilitate both of these things? Most people can... My sermon last week was 9 minutes long, and it almost received a standing ovation, not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't say. Because it was 9 minutes long. I kept it short and sweet and to the point. Most people can only concentrate on a topic for a short period of time. Could a shortened education time be a positive move? Could junior and senior high youth be encouraged to participate in brief education time between services, intergenerational conversations? I've had that experience in previous churches, maybe you have as well. The joy of having junior and senior high youth participating with the adults as we treat them like adults, as they're preparing to be adult Christians in the church. Incredible for everyone. Could a longer adult education, this is going to get very detailed here for just a moment, so I'm going to fly through this part. Could a longer adult education session be offered during worship, alternating between the first and the second service from time to time, with a shortened education time between services? The point of that is to say we want to make sure that people have an opportunity to worship and have education. But if the education folks would like a longer time, they can also have that, but then we also want to honor traditional and contemporary, and so we can flip-flop from time to time. That will not be printed on the sign outside the church. Show up. Sometimes it will be this time, sometimes it will be that time. We'll simplify. A shortened education time between services can be used for all kinds of things. Temple talks, congregation-wide studies, global mission conversations, current event conversations, intergenerational education opportunities. Just think about in between worship services. We hope that there is no more trauma in the world and in our country. But if there is, can't we just say on a Saturday night, you know what, we're going to talk about the current events, and we're going to use that time to join together. And so we're not doing what we're going to do, and in between time we get to drink coffee and join together in conversation. Longer education classes could still be offered. An opportunity. We just want to show you the flexibility of our worship schedule. It could extend through one service into that fellowship education time. So there's opportunities for long, there's opportunities for short, there's opportunities for medium. Fellowship and community. A concern that many church members have raised is that they are not as connected to other church members as they would like to be. This is a church of about 2,000 members. When you are a church of about 2,000 members, you have to work harder than churches of 200 members to get to know each other. And so the worship and fellowship and education schedule being proposed, being recommended, allows us to maybe get to know each other better. Can our new building and worship education fellowship schedule strengthen the sense of community in this place? Children in worship. Many people searching for a church home look for a church with youth in worship. How can we involve our kids in worship more and also help to welcome new kids into our church? Some parents enjoy having Sunday school at the same time as worship so that they can worship with less distractions. We have heard that. That's being taken into consideration, and we're trying to offer an idea that hopefully will speak to both of these elements, that we want kids in worship, but we also want to help out with some of those distractions. It's a joy having dozens and dozens of kids in worship. If you were a part of Vacation Bible School worship at the end with dozens, almost hundreds of kids, incredible. Christmas Eve, Christmas musical, and during the summer, our 1045 worship service in particular has had countless kids at it week after week throughout the summer because there isn't Sunday school at that time. And so how can we continue to keep that going, not just in the summer, not just at special times, but all the time? And then someone really important said this. I don't know if you've heard this quote before. Let the children come. Anybody know who it was? One of our presidential candidates? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I did not mean, I know that was in the news. That was not intended to be a political jab. Let's pretend that part didn't happen. Let's focus on this part. Jesus is the one who said it. I apologize, I did not try to stir up political. Oh my goodness. Going back to bed. Children in worship, more stuff. Studies have shown that people who do not attend worship as children often grow up not to attend worship as adults. And it's a really simple concept, but one that we don't always think about, that if kids are not in worship, there won't be a magical time that they suddenly wake up and say, I should go to that place that I haven't necessarily been going to because adults tell me that I should go there. It's a faith building from birth up until adulthood. And a recent article entitled Sunday Schooling Our Kids Out of Church. One of the unintended consequences of Sunday school during worship. This is what the article says. We have raised the largest unchurched generation in the history of our country. Not only because we've had Sunday school at the same time as worship, but does it play into it? Is it a part of the reason for that? This is my idea, and it sounds silly, and I love it, so don't disagree with it. Could we offer wiggle worship? And what wiggle worship would not be on a Sunday morning. It wouldn't replace any of the other worship times, but it would be another opportunity for children, and we would be teaching kids about worship, how we worship, why we do what we do. And so it would be a worship service maybe on a Sunday evening, maybe on a Wednesday, maybe connected to the children's choir. And it would be an opportunity to say to kids, worship is for you. We want you here. We value you. And we know that you wiggle when you're in worship. Just a little bit, right? And so it gives them an opportunity to maybe sing songs where they wiggle a little bit more than on a traditional Sunday morning or a contemporary Sunday morning. But then also have it be a teaching tool to be able to say to the kids, you have value, we want you here, and we also want you to worship with the adults. And when you worship with the adults, they don't wiggle as much as you. And so let's explain to you why we stand and why we sit. Let's explain to you what some of the words like the Kyrie mean. And so it's a great teaching tool where we can teach kids so that by the time they're ready to come and be in worship with all of the adults, they're asking some of those questions and we're giving them answers. And then now it's no longer this thing that just doesn't make any sense. It's something that they've learned to understand. Many churches have started creating a child-friendly area in the worship space. So a specific area designed in the worship space where it says, kids, we want you here. And again, kind of a growing aspect where you can grow from the nursery into the cry room, into the child-friendly area, into the worship with into the wiggle worship, into the worship with adults, etc. Logistics. Can all of this happen at one time? And the short answer is yes. And maybe only for a short period of time, actually. Because again, if the church continues to grow and all of these programs grow, then we'll come back to you for another meeting and we'll say, now we have to adjust a few of these things. We probably don't need to do another building project, but now we need to just arrange where some things happen. On the one hand, a decision needs to be made right now. And on the other hand, we shouldn't rush into it because we want an opportunity for you to hear what the task force is recommending. We want to be able to listen to you, and we want to tweak and evaluate if needed. And there's more logistics. A shortened education time would require adjustments to be made to adult education, to Sunday school, to the participants, to the parents, to the teachers, everyone. We understand that. More logistics. How can we allow for good flow in the parking lot? You can't have worship end and 5 minutes later have another worship service begin. It won't work. All right? Can we borrow other parking spots? Can we talk to the city and say, we like you and you like us, and can we have some more spots on the street? Could the contemporary and traditional worship service occasionally flip-flop? Contemporary at early, traditional at late? That was asked of the task force many times, and we can answer some of those questions as we make the presentation. Ultimately, the short answer is that we felt led as a task force to say that we don't do the flip-flopping because the flip-flopping ultimately makes things so complex that you never know what service that you're going to. It also makes it so complex for worship planning that the staff alone might not even know what service they're attending. And also, simply that the whole focus is to unite the congregation. And so how can we, instead of saying, this is your worship service and this is your worship time, how can we find ways to unite more and more? So we are more than willing to listen to your input on that, and we prayerfully consider what all of that would mean. If the Saturday worship service were moved to 5:30, how would this impact pads, volunteers, and guests. It was great to have this listening session on a Saturday evening, to hear from Saturday evening folks as well, and we continue to study that idea. Teamwork. You know this. We know this. No matter what decision is made, some church members will be happy and some will be upset. And we are not taking that as a task force flippantly whatsoever. We grieve knowing that some people will be grieving. Part of why we are presenting this now is because it wouldn't be implemented for a little while. And so some of the time could just be used for grieving, to say, this isn't the way it's always been. It's not exactly the same as maybe what we would want. But how can we prayerfully move forward? And how can we unite? Whatever decision is made, it is our hope and our prayer that we can unite together in mission to make Christ known. And just to give you a heads up on how this all goes, following the congregational listening sessions, adjustments to the recommended schedule can be made if necessary. So they've been presented to the council. The council has approved. If things need to be adjusted, they can be. Although we feel really confident as a task force that we've come up with an idea that's not perfect, because no idea is, but it's flexible, exciting. A process of evaluation will also be followed upon the implementation of the new worship schedule. Most likely, we would implement the worship schedule and let it go throughout the entire school year. Upon the entire school year, we would then have an evaluation process to find out how it worked, what worked well, what didn't work well. Are you ready? So Moses had these tablets with the commandments written on them, and you may or may not remember that Moses broke the first set of tablets. We hope that we don't have to break this recommendation, but we may, again, just have to etch something new in the stone. Something can be made new all the time. So 9 o'clock, not 8:30, 9 a.m. traditional is the recommended schedule. 10:55 contemporary worship. Might sound strange, let it sit with you for a little bit. It's like buying something for $9.99 instead of $10. And though it may seem kind of silly, it does actually, it grew on us a lot as a task force. Education and fellowship between worship services. Let me give you a few more details, and then this will be back up on the screen again eventually. Details. Again, this will also now be on the church sign. Way too complicated, but for you to know. 9 o'clock traditional, with a longer adult education during traditional or contemporary, meaning that sometimes of the year it can be during the first service, but sometimes during the year it can be during the second service. That's to value both worship services, those who attend, maybe some of those who participate in those services. Can the choir then go to adult education because they maybe couldn't before? Can the 3-in-1 band maybe go because they couldn't go before? We want to be able to have that opportunity. And then that coffee and fellowship time, it doesn't have to hold exactly from 10 to 10:50. It just means when worship is done, we drink coffee in the wonderful new area for drinking coffee. And then also that 10 to 10:50, you basically need a time to be able to say, time to head to Sunday school, time to head to adult education. It is a shorter time than it has normally been, and we can answer some questions about that. We asked a lot of Sunday school teachers, and Sunday school teachers told us that a lot of times they will teach the 1-hour curriculum that they've got, but when they come to the last 15 minutes of class, they're filling time. Because again, some of us can only concentrate on 9-minute sermons, right? Some of us can only concentrate on Sunday school for a period of time. So we wonder, can we do a shorter adult education and a shorter Sunday school time, kind of a hybrid time, and do it differently? More details. Occasionally no Sunday school or adult education between worship service, so that we can instead focus on fellowship and intergenerational opportunities. The suggestion was there to also move Saturday worship to 5:30 to allow for later weddings. We can discuss that a little bit. Again, we had exciting ideas happen during our meeting yesterday regarding that. We go worship, don't throw it out the window. Once a month, once a quarter, I don't know exactly, but to teach kids about worship and prepare them to worship with adults, also to create a child-friendly area in the worship space. Those are your details. I simply want you to imagine with me for one moment what this could be like. So if you look over in that area, that's where the new entrance will be. That will be our gathering area. All right? If you've ever come to worship here before and you didn't know what door to come in, that's the spot. Imagine everyone entering the building through the same doors. Visitors no longer having to figure out where to go. Is contemporary this way? Is traditional that way? Oh, we all worship in one location. Imagine more people attending our 9 a.m. worship service than there's been in years, because some who have attended maybe the 10:30 traditional worship service will choose to participate now in this 9 a.m. worship service because they prefer the traditional worship style. Imagine more worshipers on Saturday evening too, as we have experienced this summer, because maybe some people, again, from the 10:30 traditional worship service will choose to worship on Saturday evening, as we have seen. Imagine more worshipers in the contemporary worship service, because some people from the 10:30 traditional worship service will prefer the 10:55 worship time. Some who used to attend the 9 a.m. contemporary worship service will now attend 10:55, and visitors will visit with us because we will invite them. Imagine many people sticking around after the 9 a.m. worship service for fellowship and for education. Imagine many people coming to worship early for fellowship and education, and imagine all of these people getting to know each other better through education and fellowship. Imagine some Sundays, no Sunday school or adult education between services, so we can pack that new gathering space with yummy goodies and great conversation. Imagine several times each year all congregational worship services where the music of contemporary and traditional services unite together as one. Imagine lots of kids in worship, as we've experienced this summer, because Sunday school will be offered between worship services instead of during worship. Imagine kids getting to know each other better by attending one Sunday school session instead of two separate sessions. Imagine intergenerational fellowship and education as we encourage our junior and senior high youth to participate in education and fellowship with us. And best of all, imagine the excitement and the energy from our renovated building and new worship schedule bubbling out beyond our walls as we invite our friends and our neighbors to participate in the life of our Saviors. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Imagine. And so